Happy Christmas Eve, everybody, and happy Festivus to the rest of us, for those that observe it. Festivus, where we get to say our grievances to each other. Let's air it all out, tell the truth. And that's what this episode is. We're going to tell the truth because the Chicago Bears, they stink. They are not the team that we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. Now, I wasn't one of the people that said they were going to make the Super Bowl. I was one of the guys that said, with the roster set in place, with what should be able to happen, that they should be able to compete for a wild card. Well, we're not even close to a wild card. We can't even beat a team or compete with a team that has lost upwards of 14 players that are starters and even backups to the IR. We can't even compete with them. How sad that we can't even compete. The Lions beat the Bears 34-17. The closest it got was, what was it, 20? I don't even know, 27 something. Who cares? The Bears just couldn't compete. There was a lot of moments where they showed that they didn't want to be there. And of course, it took till the second half to show that they even thought about playing football. Whereas the Lions, right from the get-go, said, we're here to play football. We're here because we're pissed off about losing to the Bills, and we're going to come out and show you. Their coaching staff got them ready to play. Whereas our coaching staff says, well, we're okay if you decide to play in the second half and not the first half. That's what happens. And it's very frustrating to continue to watch this and continue to just it's so hard to be a Bears fan. It's so hard to constantly watch the same thing over and over. I watch Lions fans say that they've gone through this, for a long time, and they now have the right to talk, right? Like they finally have their opportunity that they can post stuff and everything else. And I agree with them. They are on, they can post whatever they want. Since last year, I mean, even when they weren't really winning games, they were a tough team under Dan Campbell, right? And so they fully have the right to say whatever they want. And they've gone through stuff. They've gone through the fires and tribulations. They deserve this, right? The difference between the Lions organization and the Bears organization is that the Bears organization feels that every once in a great while, they'll find a diamond in the rough, right? Yes, I am quoting Aladdin. They'll find a diamond in the rough where they will have a coach that once in a while is going to get them to the playoffs, and that's just good enough. They find a way to say, maybe we'll get to the Super Bowl like we did in 2006. Maybe like 2018, we will get into the playoffs and we're in a position to win the NFC, maybe, somewhere in there. We're just okay with that. And that's the problem. The Bears organization will say things that they want to be competitive, they want to put product on the field. But at the end of the day, if they make money, right, this is where numbers are misleading. If they are making money, they feel like they're doing a good job. Because NFL, I know it's non-for-profit, but it is about making money. And that's why you're seeing playing on a Sunday, or for some schedules, playing on a Monday, playing on a Sunday, and then playing on Thursday. That's not good for a person's body in the NFL. But do you think the people up top care in the NFL organization? No, they don't. They see money. They see TV deals. Same thing with like the Chicago Bears. They see donors. They see advertisement. They see NFL or their ticket sales. They see product. They're about making money. The Bears are a top 10 most valuable franchises. They're one of the oldest franchises. They have a brand. When they travel, there are Bears fans across the United States due to successes of the past, due to during those times where they find diamonds in the rough, where they have these players that bring attention to the program, to the organization. When people hear the Bears, they think of Walter Payton. They think of the Fridge. They think of the 85 Bears. They think of Brian Urlacher. They think of all these players. Even Jay Cutler's a part of that. That's who they think about. And that's what brings eyeballs to it. And the Bears, while they're not a serious organization and we want to compete and win, they do have a brand of toughness and competing. They may not win. They may not always get to the championship games, but by God, you're going to earn the win. And over the last few years, that hasn't even been the case. We've shown glimpses of it. I know last year the defense played better. I know at the beginning of the year the defense played better, but it hasn't been consistent. They are just not a serious organization when it comes to let's put product on the field, coaches, scouts, the players, investing. And I know me and Zach have sat here and we keep discussing Dan Campbell and the Lions. But the reason why we keep talking about them is because years ago, before they hired Dan Campbell, they gone through it. They thought they had the coaches. They didn't have the coaches. They made these decisions. They were okay with just being a little bit under. They finally put their foot down and said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So the owners, general manager said, let's put our foot down and let's go unconventional here. We've hired guys that had previous head coaching experience. We've also hired coordinators. We've also done this. So let's go outside the box here. Let's think about the city of Detroit. We are known for hard workers. The auto industry, we're gritty. It's cold. People work out in the cold. Let's make the team that identity so that way we can get people to come and continue to support the team, and let's try to put a winning product on the field. But they also knew that if they were to make this decision, it's going to take some time, and we're going to have to really build this team up, and we need the right guy with that type of identity. Lo and behold, they find Dan Campbell. Now, Dan Campbell's been a special teams coach. He's played in the NFL. They hire him. He has his press conference, talks about biting kneecaps, right? That's unconventional. Like, nobody goes up to the podium and says, you're going to knock us down. We're going to come back up. And on our way up, we're going to bite some kneecaps off. We're going to come up. You may knock us down again, and we're going to come up, and we're going to do the same thing again. That's a player's mentality. And so players are going to respond better to that. But the organization also knew that in order to do this, where does teams start to win? Well, you have to have a D-line. You have to have an O-line. Then you start building around that. You start developing them. And Dan Campbell knew the assignment. He understood it. And that's what happened. They weren't winning games. People said, well, he's not the guy. We got to fire him. People on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, said he should have been fired from his press conference. Then when he wasn't winning right away, they said, look, this wasn't the right guy. Look at the press conference. He's crazy. He's doing this. He's doing that. But the organization knew, hey, we trust. We like the identity here. We love his press conferences. It's unconventional. Why do we need to be like everybody else? We don't need to be like everybody else. Let's be who we are, and who cares if it looks different. Some of the best coaches, some of the best general managers, some of the best programs, organizations do that. They do things different. Bill Belichick did things different with the Browns and got them to win. He took that model, grew it, and won with the Patriots. Nick Saban took that model to Alabama and was doing things different, running it like an NFL organization. Mike Leach wanted to run his offense. He wanted to do things different. He and Hal Mummy, and look what happened. Those are just little examples. To do things different and go against the grain sometimes is a good thing. But when you make that decision, it is going to take time, and you have to make sure you have the right person and people put in place. And you have to understand that when you try to build it up from the ground up, it's going to take time, but then the hope payoff is where they are now, where the Lions are now. Now they're not done yet. They want to win a Super Bowl, but that's what takes time. And this is the difference between like a Lions organization and the Bears organization. A couple years ago, they decided, hey, we had our thing in 2018 where we were the doink away from going. We make it to the playoffs, but it was a weird way to make the playoffs. We had to rely on people winning and losing. Matt Nagy kind of lost the locker room. And so they made the decision, let's tear down the roster. Let's go into the draft. We have a new general manager in. We're going to hire a new head coach, and we're going to tear it down. And at the time, that sounded like the right idea. That year was tough to be a Bears fan. We knew that we weren't going to really win a lot of games, but they were taking those proper steps to do so. But the difference is here, they hire a guy that was a defensive coordinator. He wasn't one of the big-time names to hire in Matt Eberflus. Now, again, I think Matt Eberflus is a decent defensive coordinator. Now, there's reports saying that the Colts were going to fire him. I don't know how true those are, and you have to take those with a grain of salt. But we hire a lame duck coach to bring in to try to glue it, help piece it together. Now, I wasn't a fan of the hire because it was just one of those, if you're going to make this, you're going to have, I'm not saying Dan Campbell was a splash hire either, but you have to decide to do things different. And if you feel like that guy is going to do things different, bring him in. I don't know what Matt Eberflus said that was going to bring in that type of mentality to do things different, but they hired him. And we felt like we were going to, rebuild this roster up. And then here in a couple years, we're going to do it right. We're going to get it done. We're going to be competitive, right? And that's all we're really looking for as Bears fans is we want to be competitive. We want to play tough. And if you do those things, you're put into position for the playoffs and to move on. And this can just be a constant thing of maybe once in a while, you're going to have a year where it's wild card. It's not necessarily clinching the division. It's not this. And they were saying the right things. Ryan Poles was saying the right things. Former general manager was saying the right things. It really looked like when they were tearing it down there and tried to build it up. We saw a little bit of movement. We saw them get DJ Moore. We saw them get a couple guys here and there. But when you really look at it, some of the roster moves have not worked out. And that's part of the NFL. You kind of hope they do, but they don't. You decide to get in this draft Caleb Williams, Adunze, and then Cole Kmet emerges. And then you have Swift to this big sign deal and everything else. But do you have the right people? In the Bears, in typical Bears fashion, tried to do things different. They didn't give it time and decided, let's go back to doing what we were doing before because we once in a while find that diamond in the rough and hopefully we'll have a team. And they thought the roster was made to be that diamond in the rough. But you did not build the team up right from the offensive line and defensive line up, so that's where we're struggling. You continually change coaches because it's not fitting what you want. Because if a coach wants to go against it a little bit, you get rid of them, or you just say, you know what, let's find a yes guy. Let's find a guy that's not gonna, he's just gonna be at the steering wheel of the boat or whatever that is, and we're just gonna kind of float here. We're not gonna fully go in. Like Dan Campbell said in his in the Hard Knocks, said, we're just going to tread water and we're going to keep going until we can drown you. Like, coaches say that stuff all the time, but since it's on camera, people go, oh my God. Like his press conference, that's what they say all the time in the locker room. But because he said it publicly, everybody's like, oh my God. Like, he really said that. And this is what the difference is, and this is why the Bears are so far behind. Right now, the Bears are in turmoil because a head coach that you thought about firing last year, but for some reason said, well, since the team started to play better and the defense started to play better, let's just give him another shot because that's easy. The Bears general management take the easy way. They don't want to stir the pot. They don't want to do things the hard way. So they keep him. And as a fan, you hope, okay, maybe they're going to turn a corner. Maybe he's figured it out. And you give people that sometimes that benefit of the doubt. Maybe you look at the coaches landscape out there and said, the guys out there, we would get almost, I don't know. Who knows? So you get a quarterback that's a rookie. You have a guy, but then you make that lame duck hire OC, where you could have had maybe a Cliff Kingsbury as OC, and you see what they're doing in Washington. They just beat the Eagles yesterday. And all this stuff. But then you don't really invest in your O-line, D-line. You kind of keep that status quo. And that's another example of we're not going to go against the grain. We're going to do things easy. That's what happens. And then you start to realize as this year goes on, there's no leadership on the offensive side of the ball. There's no leadership on the defensive side of the ball because you got rid of some of those guys that could have been those leaders. And then you start to realize, our head coach really isn't a leader of the locker room. He just kind of is a moral victory guy, which coaches, we always say that we don't believe in moral victories, but we kind of do to an extent. You kind of find positives in the negative stuff that happens, but you're also not blind to that if the same things are happening over and over and over again, it's hard to find moral victories. And then you got players that are not motivated, which is on the coaching staff, but it's also on them because I said this yesterday in the pregame. You are NFL players, you are adults, you're getting paid a lot of money to play a game. If you're not motivated to win, there's a problem because there's a lot of motivating things that you could find. If you're, okay, we're not going to playoffs, what's going to motivate me? You need to sit back and say, well, where does this money come from? Well, it comes from people like the fans. All that money goes to help pay you. So if you're not motivated by that and thinking about people that today on Christmas Eve have to get up and go to work, some on Christmas Day have to get up and go to work, and they're not getting paid millions of dollars. They're getting paid, some are getting paid from $20,000 upwards to $50,000 a year. And they're finding a way to live with inflation and everything else and are struggling. You're getting paid a lot of money to play a game. And without their support, finding time to put your game on the TV, saving up to take their kid to a game for the first time, paying the streaming services, they save up all year to buy their kid their first jersey and everything else. That needs to motivate you and say, we got to put a good product on the field for the fans and to show that we belong. And this is what happens. But we seem to have a lot of guys on the team that don't care. They'll show glimpses of it, but they just really don't. And it's just constant, we're in a wheel that just keeps happening. It's the same thing over and over. And so at some point, as a Bears organization, they need to make a decision of, we got to be different. And they don't. They never have. And I never understood why. You got to do things different. I'll give you a high school example if any high school guys listen. The feed the cat stuff and the sprint-based football, that stuff's different. But coaches out there decided, let's be different. And a lot are finding success with it. That's just a little example. So the Bears right now, they're just not a serious organization. I don't want to hear, well, look at the money they have. They're talking about getting a new stadium. The Bears don't deserve a new stadium. Well, Steve, you just sat there and said we got to do stuff for the fans. Yeah, fans would love a new stadium, and they'd love the fancy bells and whistles. But think about why they're doing it. They're doing it because they want to make money, right? They want to host things. They want to do this because, at the end of the day, it's all about money. That's all the NFL cares about. That's all organizations that aren't serious about winning. What's the next thing they're going to be serious about is money. It all comes down to money. So with the play on the field, you have a run game that wasn't there because we don't have a running back that we're paying a lot of money to a running back that is not a consistent downhill runner. There was a GT play yesterday where the guard kicks out and the tackle wraps underneath, and sometimes it's messy, but you got to put your foot down. And when the guard kicks out, that's telling the running back, well, he's kicking him out. I have to run underneath no matter what. And I may only get 3 yards, but it's a hard, nutty, gruddy 3 yards. And sometimes the tackle wrapping underneath, you're obviously, as a running back, faster than the tackle. So you have to follow and try to get underneath. And he didn't. He bounced it out, and he got tackled. And that was just a summary of our run game, where Swift is a side-to-side runner, wide zone, inside zone. But guess what? Our O-line is not built for that. They're built for the gap. So you have this turmoil that is happening here with that. You have an O-line that started to break down in pass protection. Even though Caleb Williams has shown a lot of glimpses of being good, he holds on to the ball too long. He's so worried. He doesn't want to throw interceptions, which he hasn't. But he also will hold on the ball too long in that fact and doesn't throw guys open and takes a couple chances here and there. He's not super accurate on the deep ball. We had a glimpse of it yesterday. So the development has not been there for him. And then the coaching staff just doesn't get them ready to play. The Lions got us to jump off sides on 4th down. They made a couple deep balls. Jared Goff had an amazing fake slip. The Lions coaching staff and everybody on the side was like, ball, to get the defense to freeze, thinking that the ball's on the ground, and then the guy's open deep and throws it. That's called an organization that's going to do things different. That's called an organization that is going to do whatever they can to win. You saw a glimpse where the personal foul on the Bears side, we got caught doing the extra shove, but their guy shoved us first, but it's always the second guy that gets caught. But immediately Dan Campbell brings him over and says, we can't do that. We can't afford to do that. And it was coaching him up. Nobody coached up the Bears guy. That just shows a guy that knows the locker room, knows how to talk to players. And that's what the Bears don't have, right? I know that Thomas Brown seems like a really good guy. I'm sure if he was just an offensive coordinator, it would actually be pretty well. We saw glimpses of that. I know they weren't winning, but think about it. You're an OC for just a couple weeks. You can't do what you necessarily want to do. You kind of have to do what was already put in place by Eberflus and Shea Waldron. You can put your own spin and twist on things a little bit there, but at the end of the day, you have to continue to call what was kind of already there. Then you're down a coach when you get rid of Shane Waldron. Now you're down another coach with Matt Eberflus. So now these NFL guys have to double coach and do this and do that. It's not a good situation. But also, I blame everybody, right? As a fan and as a coach, and you're looking at it, you have to blame everybody. I got to blame the players. I got to blame the coaching staff. I got to blame the general manager. I got to blame the president. I got to blame the owners. So now you're in this turmoil, and the Bears, I said this weeks ago, my co-host that's usually on here, he's been on vacation, enjoying himself. I said this to him. I said, I just don't think that the Bears are going to win another game. I really don't. I said, if you're going to do it, you had to catch the Lions with these injuries. You had to maybe compete against the Vikings after we saw what they did the first time. You maybe are going to get the Seahawks and just the way you played against the Packers, because the Packers is a rival game and things go out the window. But I also said that's very, very unlikely. I said, I don't think they're going to win another game. And I have been right so far. They have not won another game. I want them to, just as a fan. You want to get a win. But we're scared to get wins because then they're going to say, well, look at Thomas Brown. Look at what he did. So we should probably keep him, right? And it's going to be a Matt Eberflus thing all over again. But right now, I don't. If they won one more game this year, that's not going to do it. Even if they beat the Packers at the end of the year, that does not tell me to keep Thomas Brown as the head coach. And I said they're not going to win another game because of the turmoil that from top to bottom has caused these players not taking things seriously and taking responsibility themselves, because we have no leadership anywhere. We have no leadership on offense, defense, special teams, from a coach, from the top. There is no leadership whatsoever. And so in order to fix this, a lot of names have been thrown around for this head coaching position. We talked about Thomas Brown before, me and Zach did, and I'm still on the boat of you don't hire him as a head coach because we're just not seeing it. If we saw fire, competitiveness the whole time, you would maybe make a case to say, okay, but we're not seeing it, so he's got to be thrown out as a head coaching possibility. OC possibility, yes, but I just don't see a new coach coming in, and if they want to bring him on as OC, that he stays as an OC saying, well, I think I should be like, yeah, it just doesn't work that way. I also think that we need a person to come in that's going to bring, like, what you have to determine what's the biggest problems here. And all I hear from people on TV, from other podcasts, from everything else, that you need somebody to come in that's going to develop Caleb Williams, because that's the biggest issue, is development of Caleb Williams. My argument to that is, okay, I agree that Caleb Williams has to get developed. He's a rookie right now. Things are going to continue to he's shown a lot of glimpses. He's passed for a lot of yards, hasn't thrown interceptions, but there are things that he still has to improve on. So I agree to an extent that that's what they're looking for. But why is Caleb Williams the top of the list? To me, it needs to be organization and team, because think about it, the defense is not playing well. The offense as a whole is not playing well consistently. And so as a whole thing, what is going to be the top priority? Is it to bring in an offensive coordinator that's good, and to be a head coach that's going to come in and able to help the development of Caleb Williams, to help develop the offense and build the offense the way they want? Then you hope that they hire a good defensive coordinator that can oversee the entire defense and get that thing moving in the direction that it needs to. I agree to that to an extent. So a lot of names have been thrown around to help bring this in. And they said these names yesterday, but there's one name that they really haven't said on TV. They started to, but some of these broadcasters have not said this name. So one of the names that gets thrown around is Cliff Kingsbury to come in as head coach, because he played quarterback in college, had a small cup of coffee in the NFL, went back to college and helped coach at college at Texas. He was, quarterbacks coaches. He was an OC. Then he was the head coach at Texas Tech. He coached Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. Then he went to Arizona, had a small stint there. Then he helped even coach Caleb Williams. So that's what they're looking at. So I want us to think about this. I understand it from a previous head coach perspective. I understand that you're watching what they're doing at Washington, and he's coaching up Jane Daniels. Those are all very good things. Here's his record as a head coach at Arizona. He took over in 2019. They went 5-10, then 8-8, then 11-6, which was an awesome year. Then he went 4-13. Things started to fall apart. They got rid of him. They felt like they had a better team than what was going on. He was 28-37, trying to rebuild it. And you've heard me say this before. I feel that in college, you get 3 or 4 years up and towards of 6 years to try to build a program. In the NFL, it's usually 3 to 4 years. And are you seeing constant improvement, which you did, 5-10 to 8-8 to 11-6. But then that next year, you need to go 11-6. It doesn't necessarily have to happen again, but you have to look at something similar. Is it improving? Are things around you going good, even though this is happening? And it just didn't work out that way. And usually they start off good, and then halfway through the year or after the halfway mark, things start to go down a little bit with him as head coach. I would be okay with the hire, but they're ultimately saying that we're going to bring him in because an offensive coordinator, our offense is what's important, and our quarterback is what's important. So that's why we would want to bring him in. Now, before we move on to the next couple of names, I want you to think about our history here as the Bears organization of what has happened with our head coaching hires, right? Yes, we don't want to talk about it because it's a bad time when you think about who we have hired, right? So I want you to think about we hire Lovie Smith, right? He was the head coach in 2004 to 2012. He had been a DC, he'd been around. So we hire a coordinator. So I'm not saying we shouldn't hire a coordinator, but Lovie Smith was a little different, right? He'd done special teams, he'd been around some guys like legendary coaches. So you bring him in, he was that person that was gritty to bring that in, and we had the gritty defenses, right? Well, after 2012, we go 10-6 and he gets fired, which didn't understand. Maybe they had enough, who knows? So they go outside the box here, and let's hire a guy that's an offensive mind. Let's bring him in. So they hire Mark Trestman. Do I need to say more about hiring Mark Trestman? Well, we got to bring a guy in to help get Jay Cutler going. We got to bring a guy in to get this offense right, because offense is important. The fans want to see points and everything else. He wasn't a leader of the locker room. A lot of things went wrong. He only lasted 2 years. So then they hire a lame duck coach in John Fox, who I know he took a team to the Super Bowl before. He went 14-34. He was a guy that was just kind of status quo. We're just going to do things enough. Not like Dan Campbell. We're going to tread water out to the deep end. They wanted to stay where the high tide was coming in. That happened, right? And he's a defensive guy, right? So let's go outside the box again. And we're going to hire somebody that can come in. We need a quarterback. We need this. Where is he coaching? So we hire Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy called a game or two for the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, this is perfect. Bring him in. We need a guy to help with the quarterback. Look what they did with the Kansas City Chiefs. Comes in. I know we do well in 2018. There's your diamond in the rough, so that the organization says, okay, look, there's our diamond in the rough. Here's this happening. He did this his first year, so let's just try to see if we can't try to just hopefully we find it again. So I want people to realize, though, that Matt Nagy never really called plays. Nobody at the Kansas City Chiefs really calls plays. It is Andy Reid. He gives those people that title, gives them he's a part of the process. He does that so that guys can hopefully find a job, like we've seen. Like we saw what happened to Eric Bieniemy when he went to Washington, then he went to UCLA. Now he's fired from there. So it just kind of shows exactly that these people are not calling plays. They're a part of the process. They are another set of eyes for Andy Reid to see what's going on. This is what happens. We saw what happened with Matt Nagy. So then they said, okay, let's hire a defensive coordinator because we have to go opposite here. So then they hire a lame duck, Matt Eberflus, and the rest is history. So now, since we keep flip-flopping, Lovie Smith's a defensive guy, Mark Trestman's an offensive guy, John Fox is a defensive guy, Matt Nagy's an offensive guy, Matt Eberflus is a defensive guy. So now the next logical step is to hire an offensive coordinator, and I want you guys to stick with me about where I'm going with this. So since Cliff Kingsbury's name's thrown around, so then the next name that gets thrown around a ton, and we saw him yesterday, was Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson has been an OC with the Lions throughout this whole process. Now, the reason why it's a name that gets thrown around a lot is because look at where the Lions have come from. Yes, Dan Campbell gets tons of credit, but Ben Johnson has bought into what Dan Campbell wants. He believes in the grittiness. You see that on his offensive play calling. He is aggressive. They do want to run the football. They run a lot of gap scheme. They make sure that things are there for their players. He finds a way to get them open. The offensive line, they had built that offensive line from the ground up, so he caters to what the offensive line can do. He caters to what Jared Goff can see and throw, and has done a very good job. And he has helped create that offense, right? And you've seen it. So that is why this is a name that gets thrown around a lot. Ben Johnson also says he's going to be picky if he were to go be a head coach for a couple reasons. One, he likes Dan Campbell. He likes what's going on. He likes what they're building. Number two, he likes that he has control of this offense. It's where he wants it to be. And he's doing well, so he kind of wants to be picky. He doesn't want to go to a rebuild. He's already been a part of the rebuild. He wants to go somewhere where he feels like he doesn't have to rebuild it as much. But I want people to think about this. I'm not saying he didn't have a hand in rebuilding Jared Goff and what he has become, but Jared Goff was good before. So is he actually a quarterback whisperer, or is he just going to be a guy that brings in an offense that's going to make it better? If we're going to talk about the Bears, for Caleb Williams, which is highly possible. The different formations, the different fun plays, and everything else, that's what kind of makes him a sexy hire. But he has no head coaching experience. Everybody does things their own way. So my question mark with Ben Johnson is going to be, if you were to hire him as the head coach, is he going to be able to have somebody come in that's a defensive guy and just kind of take over the defense? What has he learned from Dan Campbell and being able to have fingerprints all over the place? And he's going to call plays. And I'm not saying a head coach doesn't have to not call plays, but when you call plays, you're very focused on that side of the ball. So when things are happening, making head coaching decisions during the game, which we've seen debacles with Matt Nagy, we've seen debacles with Matt Eberflus. So that would be some of my question marks. Now, I'd be happy with the Cliff Kingsbury hire. I'd be way more happy with a Ben Johnson hire, because at least what does he learn from Dan Campbell to get the players to play the way they're playing in Detroit? Can he copy that? But a name that does not get thrown around, it kind of did, but I haven't really heard it in a couple days. It wasn't said with the broadcasters, and I keep going back to it, is Mike Vrabel. Now, the reason why people don't want Mike Vrabel is because he's not a offensive mind, because people are thinking about Caleb Williams. He was a DC with the Houston Texans in 2017, and then he got the head job for the Titans in 2018. So he's not really like this coordinator. He's not this big time name. And we just keep thinking about the offense, and they're like, what's he doing now compared to what Ben Johnson's doing and everything else? I think that with the problems that the Bears have, you need somebody to come in and able to command that locker room. And I'm not saying Ben Johnson can't do these things. I'm a big fan of Ben Johnson. I would love Ben Johnson to coach in Chicago, especially with the offense. But he's not going to leave the Lions to go to the Bears just to be an OC. If he was leaving, it was to be a head coach. There are still a lot of pieces that have to be built with the Bears. The O-line has to be retuned. The defensive line's got to get ramped up. We need depth on the defense side of the ball. The offense pieces are there. I think we do need a different type of running back that can get downhill, but that's just me. The wide receivers are there. The tight end's there. So there are some pieces there. Mike Vrabel, if you think about the problems with the Bears, Mike Vrabel is a guy that played in the NFL at the highest level, and he played with the Patriots, learned how to do those things. He was around at Ohio State, around a couple different places, not much, but has proven that to go to a place that doesn't win, that was in turmoil, and get them to just play tough. And as a guy, kind of like a Dan Campbell, that will go up to that press conference and say what he wants and say things that are unconventional. There's a video going around when they lost a game. Some reporter, I can't hear the question that the reporter said, but he didn't like it. And he finally said, because losing fucking sucks. And then, and he says it sucks. And, I got to find a way to get these guys to go and play, because he takes responsibility for that. Then he says, do you have any other thoughts? Like the reporter, he will do and say things unconventional. When he got to Tennessee in 2018, they go 9-7. Okay. Then they go 9-7 again. And then they go 11-5, 12-5. Then they go 7-10 and 6-11. But if you remember, the general management started to step in and make decisions on the roster that he didn't agree with, and try to have some say, which I think a head coach should have some say, just some opinions on the roster, because he's the one that works with them. And then he had to, he's got to hire these coordinators. He loses a good coordinator. And so people already are like, well, then he didn't hire a new coordinator. Well, he's learned, right? Like, yeah, we have to look at what they've learned. And I think he would have learned how to hire a good coordinator, especially his time. His last head coaching stint was in 2023, so he's had a little bit of time here to kind of step back and reflect. He and the management started to not get along. So he's 54-45 as a head coach. He didn't have a quarterback like a Caleb Williams. He didn't have all these receivers. He got a defense to play harder. He didn't have like these all-star defensive players. Got them to play well, sent some to Pro Bowls. He's a guy that's just going to be a head coach and make sure things are going well and get the locker room right and get the players ready to play, have his fingerprints all over the place. His time away, I'm sure he's learned a couple things. I think that's what the biggest problem with the Bears is. We hire some of these quote-unquote coordinators. I think Ben Johnson would be different than these other guys we've hired, but I think Mike Vrabel would be able to come in. He had his coaching stint. He's had time away here a little bit. I'm sure that he wants to be a head coach in the NFL again. He's talked around with, different coaches. So I'm sure he'll be able to hire some good people, and they have to fit what he wants. And I want you to think back 41 minutes, maybe not quite 41 minutes ago, but somewhere there where I described the Lions. Does it sound like I'm describing the Lions? Bring somebody in that's going to be gritty. Bring somebody that's going to say things unconventional. Bring a guy in that's going to be able to command the locker room, a former player, able to coach up players when they do something wrong, and no matter where it's at, have their fingerprints everywhere, develop it, build it, get them to play well, and able to compete at a high level. Oh, that sounds like Dan Campbell. So if we're going to try to slowly copy the Lions model, I think Mike Vrabel needs to be that person. Now, there's rumors that he wouldn't go. He might be going somewhere else. People are saying he's going to Ohio State. The Bears need to be calling him to bring that in. The only other offensive mind that's a coordinator that has proven that they can do it at the high level is Kyle Shanahan. If for some reason Kyle Shanahan were to be let go from the 49ers, I don't think we should trade for him because of the names that are out there. We don't need to do that. But if we were to trade for, or if he's let go, he would be the number one phone call over Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel because he's proven that he can do it while being the play caller. His offense is great with the pieces that the Bears have. He understands that it's the O-line that's got to be retuned because wherever he's gone, they've had a good O-line, and he's been able to do it. But if that's not the case, I think it needs to be in order: Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury. That's just kind of who I think. That needs to be. I think the Bears just need to put their foot down and say, we're calling Mike Vrabel. We're going to talk to him. We're going to figure this out. And I think that needs to be the person. And they also have to talk to him saying, do you have guys that you think that you could hire to bring in? Because if you're just going to be the head coach, then you got to be able to hire two coordinators and prove that you can hire them and get things to where they need to go. The locker room isn't going well. Our team's not playing hard. That's the person. So from what I've seen yesterday, and all the other games, I think Mike Vrabel needs to be that person that they could bring, that he could bring in, and try to fix some of this because it's not going well. The Bears stink again, and we're just limping to the end of the season. And I want the season to be over because we need to get to the offseason. It needs to happen. We need to make some changes. I think it's Ryan Poles' last go around. If he can't fix some of the roster stuff, if they can't hit a home run with a hire as a head coach, then it's over. Then we need to hire a new general manager. So I think it's his last go around. This is not going well for the Bears at all. Thanks everybody for watching. Podcast will start to ramp back up. This is the Bear Down segment. So like and subscribe to the Coach Steve Show YouTube channel. Follow it right on Apple and iTunes. Follow on X and Instagram, Coach Steve 72. Rumble, the Coach Steve Show as well is on Rumble. TikTok, Coach Steve 72 as well. And leave a comment in the comment section down below about who the Bears should hire and everything else. Watch out for other podcast episodes and all that good stuff. So thank you guys for watching and or listening. This is Coach Steve. We will see you guys next time.